Well, TJ, I interviewed a guy named Jack Gilden. He wrote a book called The Fast Ride about spectacular bid. Jack is a Baltimore guy. I don't think he'd ever written books in his life, and he wrote two one about spectacular bid and one about the Baltimore Colts in the '60s. And the books were unbelievable. I couldn't put either one of them down. I actually interviewed Jack about the horse racing book, The Fast Ride, and it told a story about a trainer named Bud Delp. You may not have heard of him, but he had a lot of success in the '60s and the '70s. And the races of those days there were lots of drugs, there was prostitution, there was a little bit of intimidation and bullying going on. And it was a pretty lurid tale, but you just couldn't put this book down. Anyway, I interviewed him, and then on Facebook, he was challenged about his book by a Washington Post reporter named John Scheinman. I don't know if you know John Scheinman. He used to cover the Colts, and he covered horse racing for a long time for the Post as well. But anyway, Scheinman's big point of contention was he didn't talk to Buddy Delp's widow, who was in her 80s now, and it's unclear what her memory was. But he was really mad that she wasn't consulted. But all in his book, he talked to the jockeys, he talked to everybody else except for her. And I partly defended Jack because I enjoyed the book and I interviewed him, so I guess I felt kind of responsible. When you're a reporter and you're writing these books, do you have to talk to every single person? Would you have to talk to someone's widow about things that she wasn't even there to witness? All she would hear probably were things that Bud Delp would tell her at night. What would be your opinion on that? And I know this has got nothing to do with your job, but I was dying to ask you this anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. If you look at it as a broader question of, how far do you go when you're reporting? How do you know when it's enough, right? I know nothing about him. I know nothing about her. I know nothing about the story. I don't know you know, I don't know when they got married. I don't know if she was with him in those years. What I can tell you is, however many people I talk to, it always feels like it couldn't have been enough. And there's always one more that you can do. For me, the one that comes to mind is the Brittany Griner story that I wrote that we published in December about her time over there, which took me almost a year to do. And you're trying to tell a story about somebody's experience, and I wanted to talk to at least one of her teammates. I ended up getting two of them, but even that, it didn't feel like enough. What am I missing? You have to think of it in terms of what are the different elements of this person's life, who had access to them, who had that person's ear. I look at, to me, one of the great lessons in reporting is from a book that just came out a couple of years ago by Robert Caro, who is probably the greatest journalist historian, well, maybe ever. I don't know, but he's the one who wrote 4 volumes with a 5th to come on the life of Lyndon Johnson, which are probably the best biographies ever done. At least one of them won the Pulitzer. At least one won the National Book Award. He won the Pulitzer for his biography on Robert Moses. That first Johnson biography came out in 1981, and we're still waiting for the last volume now.
Wow.
And he's in his mid-80s. And Caro is so ridiculously thorough. And he did a book a couple years ago called On Writing, and about his process. And he talked about what it took to break through the myths of Lyndon Johnson. And I mean, they're not just about Lyndon Johnson. They're the story of the American 20th century, and how much Johnson was there for all of it. But he talks about all these myths from his hometown about how, what a great guy he was and the great family life and all these things. Caro not only moved out to Texas, he's a Brooklyn guy. He moved out to Texas with his wife to let people know, no, we're serious. We're not just going to do a hit and run, tell the story of this man's life and leave. He actually, in order to talk to Lyndon Johnson's brother, the family home is an historic landmark, and he got permission from, I don't know, it was a Park Service, whoever, manages it, to get permission to take Lyndon Johnson's brother there to the home, sit at the dinner table during dinner hours. So the light would be the same, the room's the same, the sounds, the smells, to put him in that room long after Lyndon Johnson died, and to sit behind him so that he's not looking face to face and engaging with a person, where he's really just engaging with his own memory. And he's asking him about what went on at those tables with his parents and the relationships they had. And suddenly his brother says, everything you heard before is lies. None of that's true, and breaks down and tells him in a way that nobody ever had the truth about Lyndon Johnson's upbringing. I don't have that option on every story to take somebody to a national landmark and to their family home and recreate that. But what it shows you is that even good reporting won't always get you to where you need to be, because there's a lot to break through. There are people's memories which are deeply fallible. The human memory is a terrible thing to rely on. Even when they're in good faith, thinking they remember something. Confirmation bias is a huge thing to overcome. Myth is a huge thing to overcome. And what it took him just to, Robert Caro, to do that. I mean, again, it's been 40 years since that first volume came out.
Wow.
And he's still at it. And so when it comes to, should you have talked to one more person? The answer is always yes. Can you talk to one more person? At some point, no. And that's one of the flaws of journalism, is that when you see a story nice and neat, it's set in typeface, even if it's on a computer or if it's on a piece of paper, it feels definitive because there's a period at the end of those sentences. And it's black and white, and it's got a headline. It seems so official. And even the best stories are flawed documents created by flawed people interviewing other flawed people. And you just do your best to get it as right as you can.